Say you hear something moving in the dark. You know you're alone, but the sound doesn't stop. It gets closer, closer, until it feels like it's right behind you. But when you turn around, there's nothing there. Ever felt like someone was watching you? What if that feeling wasn't just in your head? I'm about to share a story with you that might just change the way you look at your own reflection. A story about a man who thought he was safe until his own mind betrayed him. But before I dive into that, let me warn you, this isn't your typical ghost story. No, this is far worse. It's something far more unsettling. Something that might make you think twice before you go to bed tonight. Because this is a tale of how one man's mind turned against him, and how it might be something that could happen to anyone. It all started with a strange feeling, the kind you get when you wake up in the middle of the night and you just know something's not right. For Robert, it began innocently enough. He had recently moved into an old house on the edge of town, a place that had always been a bit off. People whispered about it, but Robert didn't believe in ghost stories. What he didn't know was that the house wasn't just haunted by the dead. It was haunted by something much darker, something much more terrifying, the part of his own mind he couldn't control, and it was slowly pulling him into a nightmare he couldn't escape. The first sign was subtle. The mirrors. He was never a fan of mirrors, but when you move into a new place, you get used to seeing your reflection. At least that's what Robert thought, until he began to notice something strange. The reflection in his bathroom mirror seemed to linger for a moment longer than it should. Just a few seconds, but it was enough to make him uneasy. But he ignored it. After all, mirrors can play tricks on you, right? Days passed and Robert started noticing more oddities. Small things. Little sounds he couldn't explain, like footsteps when no one was around. A door that creaked open by itself. His phone's battery draining faster than usual, even when he wasn't using it. He brushed it off, telling himself it was all in his head. But then, one night, it happened. He was lying in bed, the darkness wrapping around him like a thick blanket. He had just started to drift off when he heard a voice, faint at first, like a whisper, coming from somewhere deep in the shadows of his room.
Robert.
He sat up, heart racing, looking around the room. There was no one there. The voice, it didn't sound like his own. It was colder, distant. It sent a chill down his spine and his breath caught in his throat. He grabbed his phone, turned on the flashlight, and swept the room. Nothing. He thought it was just a dream, maybe the remnants of a nightmare, but when he turned the light off and tried to fall asleep again, it came back. The whisper, louder this time.
Robert, I see you.
He leaped out of bed, running to the bathroom to splash water on his face, hoping it would clear his head. But as he stood there, staring into the mirror, he saw something that made his blood run cold. His reflection wasn't him. At first, he thought it was just the lighting, the shadows playing tricks on him. But no. The face staring back at him was twisted, deformed. His own eyes were dark, hollow, and his mouth, it stretched into a sinister grin that didn't belong to him. And then, that reflection smiled at him. It wasn't his smile. It wasn't even his face anymore. Robert staggered back, his chest tightening. The reflection didn't move as he did. It remained still, staring right at him. He grabbed the towel, wiped his face, and looked again. It was gone. He blinked. Nothing. Just his own reflection. The same familiar face he had looked at every day. Was he losing his mind? So the days after that were a blur. Robert couldn't sleep. His mind kept racing, filled with thoughts of what he had seen. Was it just stress? Was the house messing with him? The whispers continued, but now they weren't just whispers. They were voices, louder, more distinct, more demanding. And then one night, it happened again. Robert was lying in bed, wide awake, when he heard a loud thud from the hallway. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear footsteps again, slow and deliberate. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. Someone, something, was walking towards his room. The door creaked open.
Robert.
This time it wasn't just a voice, it was a presence. a feeling that washed over him like an icy wave. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. The air felt thick, suffocating. And then he saw it. In the corner of the room near the doorway was a figure, tall, dark, and formless. Yet, it was almost familiar, as if it was a twisted version of himself. Its face was shadowed, but Robert knew, he knew, that it was him.
Come with me.
Robert's eyes widened in terror. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his throat. His body felt heavy, frozen in place. The figure moved closer, its long, skeletal hands reaching out. And then, in that moment of pure dread, Robert understood. The figure was him, but not him. It was the other half of his mind, the part he had tried to bury. The darkness that had always been there, lurking just beneath the surface. Robert never spoke of what happened that night. But the house was never the same. He left the next day, abandoning his home and everything inside. His life was never the same either. Wherever he went, the whispers followed. No matter how far he ran, he could always hear the voice just behind him. And no matter how many mirrors he broke, he could never escape the other half of his mind. The darkness was always there, waiting to pull him back. Think you could handle that kind of darkness? Maybe you should stick around to see what happens next.